Hi, Jennifer Warren here, and I'm just going to give an overview of a talk that I'm going to be doing on March 12th at a South by Southwest adjacent event for IvyFon, an investor network conference. And I look forward to speaking there and for my other panelists as well. I'm looking forward to being with them. And also just, appreciate the opportunity to share my observations and insights about energy, the energy transition, and what I'm working on. The title of the panel is Post ESG, and we've had a lot of discussion surrounding this for the last couple of years with ESG, post ESG, ESG2, all that. But also, I want to give a shout out for Women's History Month, the month of March, and that the 8th was International Women's Day. Just want to give a shout out to all my sisters around the world, all the women doing amazing work in the world. May that continue, and may that opportunity spread to other parts of the world where the opportunities are not as prevalent as they are in many advanced economies. And I know that's going to be changing over time. One thing I can say is really a theme in my work right now is probably regeneration, and regarding my current work and sort of the context in which my advisory work is. Anyway, I will show a few slides and then I will wrap up. Thank you. So there's something going on here. So the title of my presentation is, The Color of the Energy Transition, a Texas Point of View. And this is just showing that these are the shale basins in the United States. And one of my interesting work that I have landed in was the shale stories. And that really started in 2005 with Scott Sheffield when I was doing an interview for the Cox School of Business for like a publication of theirs. And then I wrote about the natural gas boom in 2008 for a magazine called DCEO. And even at that time, we were discussing how natural gas would lower carbon emissions. And that was like, 16 years ago, and we're still talking about it now and even debating it. And then on the left here is a ranch in the Panhandle that I weighed in about the natural capital assets of it, and I'll get to that in a bit. And this is just my consultancy logo. So one of the big stories is the Pioneer acquisition by Exxon, $60 billion acquisition, creating pretty much the largest Permian player in the Permian Basin, which is the largest oil field in the United States. The Permian is like 6% of global supply. It really ramped up in like the 2003, 2014 time frame. It really, a lot of capital started pouring in, and now 10 years later, it's like 6% almost of global supply. And then the other major acquisition is Diamondback buying Endeavor. Endeavor is a private sector firm, not publicly traded like Diamondback. So they were being acquired for $26 billion, and they have really great assets in the Permian, now creating one of the largest independents in the Permian. The other big deal is the Chesapeake Southwestern merger, where Chesapeake bought Southwestern for $12 billion, and it's creating the largest natural gas player. And that really sets up things quite interestingly in the future regarding global gas. More on that in a bit. And this is just a story from 2021. And at this time, I interviewed Scott Sheffield back then, and he was even discussing how, that there would be consolidation in the industry, and now it's really taken hold. And he was considered the Permian Basin king, which he kind of has been. He's really been the voice of the Permian. He has retired as the CEO of Pioneer. Now that's Rich Dealey, but he's on the board of Exxon. So Texas economy is still burning a bit warm. I've discussed this in a couple of videos I just did with an Italian YouTuber, and those are on his channel and on my website. But the big news is, exports. If you look at these lines, U.S. exports sort of flat. If you add Texas in here, the blue line, you can see it's a different story. Our LNG accounted for almost 20% of volumes globally in 2022, and that was owing to Russia invading Ukraine and really starting to change the calculus on US LNG. If you combine Texas and Louisiana exports and specifically from the Gulf Coast, it's $315 billion in energy exports, which is 83% of US energy exports. That is a huge number, and that didn't just happen overnight. It's really, really an amazing American entrepreneurial story. And this is just showing you sort of where a lot of the action is. All the jewel tones are import facilities, regasification facilities. And if I put North America on that, you would see a lot of these warm tones, and we are largely exporting LNG. This again is just kind of showing the nature of some of the exports from the Gulf Coast. Crude petroleum, crude oil is the lion's share, call it $115 billion in exports. I think this is 2022. Natural gas and natural gas liquids right in there, call it 85 billion or something like that. And then where a lot of the action is for gas demand is emerging Asia grows to 2040. This is from Shell. This is from a recent LNG analysis by Shell. And as you can see here, it's like here towards, the sort of after 2030, it's almost like 10% growth. That's significant. And that's where a lot of the action is. And this is why you see some things changing in the United States too, as far as natural gas players starting to kind of throttle back on production because they have to be profitable and they have a lot to look forward to, as you can see with the demand growth ahead. I just want to note that, the opportunity for emissions reduction is greater now, I believe, with all these mergers, because you're going to have more efficient production, capital efficiency, and opportunities to be lower carbon. Now with a lot of these large public firms acquiring independence, all that oil and gas production is going to be rationalized and it is going to become more efficient and also, I believe, cleaner and greener. And that's also been stated by Exxon. They were saying that, in fact, with their acquisition of Pioneer, it moves forward the timetable for Pioneer's low carbon ambitions by, like a decade or something like that. So that's really significant as well. And here I just want to talk about also just with the recoveries, the shale well recoveries, again, with these mergers, the expectation is that there will be better resource recovery in the future. And I know Exxon's really expecting to lead the pack on this, as will others. Right now, from a shale well, Exxon was saying they can get 8 to 10%. And this is also, I'm going back to a conversation I had with Scott Sheffield last summer. Now that can double. And I think that's a really good thing as well. The industry is serious about methane reductions. There are many pledges to do so. In fact, when I was at the NAPE Expo in I think a month ago, I actually met a lot of the innovative firms that are helping address methane reduction emissions for all sorts of players, including some of the Mag 7 firms, which is really, really interesting. So with LNG, Shell was noting that with nature-based approaches, emissions could be reduced by 100%. That includes bio LNG, or they can be 100% compensated by offsets. And I have mentioned that I just don't think there's enough offset credits in the world right now to meet the demand for these credits. So that's going to have to be rethought. And there's been some press about that, and I'm not going to go into that. CCS can reduce emissions by 80%, LNG emissions, so that's promising. and also the idea of clean cargoes. And they will be, coming from the United States because there's a lot of will to do this. So the liquidity option idea is just that with a lot of these smaller innovative firms, they can get they can be use the large majors as clients, but they can also be acquired by majors, and you see that as well. I've seen some of the majors acquiring some innovative firms in the low carbon space, and so that's a route to a liquidity event for a firm in the future, and happening now too. So this is sort of my part of my advisory, and it has to do with resources. And this is what I was saying about my theme about regeneration. So this here on the right is a natural capital discussion I had where I was giving expert commentary about this large ranch. And part of my interest in this is that I've always had an interesting connection with nature and resources. And then with my background in economics and finance, coupled with marketing and communications, this has just been a natural segue for me. Really, I've been in resources, looking at resources from an economic point of view and capital markets point of view for, at least 2 decades. And now it's sort of, it's more in the flow of what's happening in the world with more attention to sustainability. So, and I've been, like I said, focused on it for at least 2.5 decades. So my natural capital practice is what I call it. It's a lens I use. It's an approach. It's really interesting because everyone thinks it's all about the money. We're all chasing money with this and these nature-based approaches. And maybe some are. And so in some respects, one could say liquidity is king, but articulating one's vision is really queen. And that's that's the space I kind of operate in. My approach lends itself to complex and asset-rich situations or those nature-based initiatives that have those characteristics. And again, one of the projects that I recently worked on was discussing the natural capital of a large-scale historic panhandle ranch. I assessed the salient attributes and assets, providing expert commentary. I have a slide up about it in just a sec. And then the other thing that is recent and coming out is a large-scale circular economy development in the Texas Triangle. It's super multi-layered, and it's really, really kind of a development for the future. I would say it's environment meets innovation on steroids. So again, I weighed in on the natural assets of the Turkey Track Ranch. And one of my quotes was in the press release, which was part of a global marketing campaign. And I will say too that the Turkey Track Ranch was one of the casualties in the recent fires that happened in the Panhandle, and they came out with a press release, and it was 80% was burned, but they have a lot of water. There will be regeneration as nature does. Nature will heal itself. The people will heal itself, and real sympathies, for everybody that's been impacted by that. But I also want to shout out, as I've said, about it being Women's History Month, something that I talked about in sort of my story about the Turkey Track Ranch was that women have played a key role in the last 2 centuries in developing the ranch and expanding its potential, even managing the ranch, curating all the operations. It's an astounding story, really. And I know that the women that are on the board will, continue that legacy in the future, and as the ranch is healing and regenerating. So that's that on that. Now, this is the next project that I'm have coming out, and it is a feature. And so this picture on the left is is this development, and it's like 33,000 acres, and it's near Austin. And this was the picture of it when it was up for sale. And those lakes were once coal mine pits, and they were converted into these lakes. It's an amazing story of restoration of a mining site, and sort of a new version of industrialization that's happening around the country, but especially here in this Texas Triangle project. This is just right here. This is just the day I went down to visit. You know, we were in the helicopter, and this is kind of looking down on an asset. Here down at the bottom is the Samsung chip plant, and that will be opening, you know, in the near future for production, and reflects this trend of reshoring that we see going on. Again, this is on the left is just a photo from the development, and then on the right here is sort of a reuse story. These fans used to be part of the cooling towers of the smelter, this aluminum smelter, and they're going to be reused for a really creative purpose in the future. This is just also that day, mid-January day, flying over Texas on our way to you know, the Triangle area. This was just south of Dallas. And this also is a more recent photo of the development, and again, just showing one of the lakes, and it's very lush there, and a lot of the soil remediation has this really amazing environmental story. And the gentleman that was the caretaker had been with the original industrial firm since 1983, and he oversaw the remediation of this site. And it's quite an extraordinary story. It's really circular economy at its best, in my view. This was just to note, again, writing about the natural gas boom in 2008, and then there was a bust. And now, if we look at things today, you know, the global gas scene is looking really different. And Chesapeake's move is really considered like a, you know, an optimistic move in the oil and gas space instead of a defensive move. This again is just here. Here's North America, which was missing from that other map, and here you can see these gold tones are export facilities. So. And this is also a story about global gas. And this was written in 2022, and the gentleman here featured is helping Europe produce its own natural gas resources in a couple of countries. And you know, that's really probably on the books in the future, because you know, LNG is one way to do it, but producing your own resources, that is in fact actually cleaner than importing LNG. And it also gives you the benefit of more energy security as well as jobs in the economy. And today, natural gas can be produced much cleaner and more resource efficient than the beginning of the shale booms. And so we've learned a lot, and American ingenuity, know-how, and capital is flowing to Europe to help it develop its own resources, because the alternative is, like in Germany, having to fire up coal-fired plants, and natural gas is cleaner. So in fact, if economies are trying to decarbonize, natural gas and LNG are a way to do that. And this is just showing sort of the tension of, you know, when you know, trying to make war with fossil fuels when they're really, you know, they're 80% of primary demand. And that's a difficult gauntlet to lay down, and there's starting to be cracks showing in those policies, and including capital flight and human capital flight. So in the future, I think we just have to be you know, thoughtful and methodical, you know, have the goal, but you know, be really careful about how we get there and use discernment. Um, so that's, I will stop sharing. So thank you for your time, and I will have these some slides on my website at a point after the conference. Again, happy Women's History Month.